Scipio Africanus. During the ancient Roman Empire, many men wrote their names in the eternity of history. Some will be remembered as courageous and astute commanders. Others gained fame for their cruelty and cowardice. Nero Claudius. But one name still echoes century after century: Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was born on July 13, 100 BC. As a child, Caesar was already an adventurer, being an active and good-humored boy. But at just 16 years old, his life changed abruptly. His father died, and Julius suddenly became the head of his family. Julius was the nephew of Marius, a great general and politician. Gaius Marius. He became famous for his military victories and for reorganizing the Roman legions. Marius was known for his magnetic personality. In addition, he was immensely respected by the soldiers who fought alongside him, which influenced the character of the young Julius Caesar, who saw his uncle as a role model. But during Julius' adolescence, his uncle fought a civil war against the ambitious Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Cornelius Sulla. They fought for control of the city of Rome. In the midst of this civil war, Julius Caesar married the daughter of his uncle's political ally. His beloved's name was Cornelia Canina. Together they had a daughter named Julia. Cornelius Cinemarius lost his life during a battle, and Cornelius Sulla assumed the position of dictator, which placed him above Roman law with almost absolute power in the city. Although Julius Caesar was not directly involved in the conflict, he felt threatened by the new dictator and executioner of his uncle. Seeing no other alternative, and in an attempt to flee Rome as quickly as possible, Julius enlisted in the army where he fought in distant Turkey. Julius served in the army with great distinction, even receiving the civic crown as a reward for his heroic deeds. He was promptly recognized by his superiors and veteran soldiers, showing a promising future as a military commander. But in 78 BC, Julius received news that his rival had died. Cornelius Sulla died suddenly. For Julius Caesar, this meant a chance to return home. After fulfilling his contract in the army, Julius returned home. However, to his misfortune, his inheritance was confiscated by Sulla's abusive government. To survive, Caesar used his powerful voice and oratory skills to become a successful lawyer. And by working hard, Julius Caesar managed to rebuild his family's social status. When Julius was about 25 years old, he crossed the Aegean Sea. The ship was attacked by pirates and the senior crew member was killed. The few survivors were captured to be sold as slaves. And for those born into wealthy families, a high ransom was demanded. Far from home and in a desperate situation, the future looked uncertain and bleak for Julius Caesar. The days passed slowly as Julius Caesar was held prisoner on a pirate ship. When the pirates discovered that Julius was part of a wealthy family, they demanded a lot of money to release him. The pirates demanded many silver coins in exchange for Julius' life. At the time, it was considered an absurd price, but Julius Caesar had always been a proud and fearless man. He told the pirates that they should demand even more coins in exchange for his life, but he warned them that as soon as he was free, he would travel the seas to take revenge on them. The pirates mocked Julius. Throughout the voyage, they ridiculed his arrogance, but finally they accepted the cash offer. When he was released, Julius used his oratory skills to attract sailors and warriors to his cause, and using the rest of his fortune, he assembled a fleet of ships. Caesar spent several months sailing and fighting pirate ships. His victories allowed him to profit by plundering the captured vessels. When Julius finally found the pirates who had kidnapped him, he defeated them in battle and crucified the survivors. The pirates paid a high price for mocking Julius Caesar. This increased Caesar's fame. His name was already popular on the streets of Rome. When he returned home, he was drafted into the army. Once again, he left to fight in foreign lands. Julius distinguished himself on the battlefield once more, earning the position of military tribune. This gave him the right to command many soldiers and to run for political office. Julius Caesar returned to Rome in 69 BC. That year, he began his political career, taking up a new position in the Roman Senate. His wife Cornelia became pregnant again. Everything in Caesar's life seemed peaceful. But unfortunately for Julius, his beloved wife died that year due to a childbirth full of complications that took her life and that of her baby. Shortly after his wife's funeral, Julius was sent to serve in the military in Spain. He was the administrator of the territories controlled by Rome. One day, Julius decided to get to know the city of Cadiz, where he lived, better. After walking a certain distance, he found a statue worn down by time. When Julius approached, he realized it was a statue of Alexander the Great. As he stood at the foot of the statue, Caesar felt enormous torment and began to cry. He was already 33 years old. He felt that he had not yet achieved anything great in his life. By contrast, Alexander the Great, at that same age, had already conquered an empire. At that moment, Caesar swore that he would not rest until he equaled Alexander in his conquests. Julius Caesar fulfilled his role in Spain. He gained fame as a good governor and subdued 2 local tribes that revolted against Roman occupation. But Caesar did not like spending so much time away from Rome. After completing his service in Spain, he returned to his hometown. Upon returning to Rome, Julius focused his efforts on gaining new political positions. He wanted to be Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of the Roman religion, but he was competing against 2 other respected senators. To support his campaign, Caesar spent most of his personal fortune. Julius Caesar knew that he had to win this new position. If he failed, his political career would be over, and he would be bankrupt for the rest of his life. To get around this problem, Julius allied himself with Marcus Licinius Crassus, known as the richest man in Rome. Marcus Crassus paid half of Julius Caesar's debt and guaranteed the rest, proving to be a valuable ally. Julius managed to win the election and take up the position he had hoped for, but he now owed a huge debt to Marcus Crassus. This alliance did not go unnoticed by other powerful men. General Pompey was an important figure in the Roman Senate. He was respected and even feared by other senators. Pompey did not like Julius Caesar's growing ambition. He began to observe this man who seemed to stand out from the crowd. Years passed. In 60 BC, Caesar was elected consul, the highest office in the Roman Republic. As a result, Julius Caesar gained great authority in the city of Rome. He was immune to the city's laws and could be acquitted of any criminal charges. Caesar won the elections again, and as consul, proved to be a dangerously ambitious man. That year, Julius married Calpurnia, who would remain his wife for the rest of his life. Calpurnia, General Pompey publicly demonstrated his aversion to Julius Caesar and also his dissatisfaction with Marcus Crassus. To resolve this tension, Julius met with Pompey and Crassus to form a new political and military alliance. This alliance became known as the First Triumvirate, in which the 3 most powerful men in Rome worked together to rule the Republic. Triumvirate Pompey increased the number of soldiers on the city streets, providing more security for the population. Crassus purchased a large naval fleet and sought to establish trade routes to distant lands such as Syria and Egypt, increasing his personal wealth and bringing new products to the demanding Roman markets. Caesar took military command to conquer new lands for Rome. Julius Caesar's fortunes seemed promising once again. He would not waste the opportunity to immortalize his name in history. Julius Caesar was elected to the office of Roman consul, gaining great authority in all the territories conquered by Rome. But to achieve such an important position, Julius Caesar had to ally himself with Marcus Crassus, the richest man in Rome. Caesar had not yet forgotten that day at the foot of the statue of Alexander the Great. The desire to equal Alexander in his conquests was still alive in his heart. The best way to achieve his goals was to conquer new territories for Rome, confiscating their wealth and receiving part of the taxes from the conquered cities and towns. It was there that Julius Caesar focused his attention on Gaul. Gaul was an ancient region, classified by the Romans, comprising territories where France, Belgium, and parts of Italy and Germany are located today. For the most part, Gaul was a wild land full of forests and inhabited by several very hostile Celtic tribes. With these obstacles, Gaul was not easy to invade, much less conquer. Because it was such a difficult task, Julius Caesar made Gaul the main target of his ambitions. In April 58 BC, Caesar marched towards Gaul at the head of 4 legions, about 24,000 soldiers. Julius knew that he could not simply enter the territories of Gaul. He had to plan his actions carefully, otherwise he would lose everything he had fought so hard to conquer. Despite its apparent military strength, Gaul was divided into several kingdoms that were constantly fighting each other. These kingdoms were ruled by tribal chiefs or self-proclaimed kings. They often declared war to conquer new agricultural lands or to avenge old bloody feuds between tribes. Taking advantage of this instability, Julius Caesar sent emissaries to talk to the leaders of the different tribes, seeking to establish political and military alliances. In his letters, Julius offered the military support of his legions in exchange for permission to enter Gaul and food supplies for his soldiers. The first alliances were quickly formed, and Caesar finally entered Gaul. The first conflict between Caesar's legions and the Gauls took place at the Battle of Bebrae, where the Romans encountered a much larger number of enemies. The Gauls were part of the Helvetian tribe, which had migrated into Gaul, attacking other tribes and leaving a trail of destruction. Julius Caesar organized part of his legions on top of a hill, gaining a strategic position against the Gauls. The rest of the legions were hidden on another hill covered by trees. The Roman legions managed to stop the initial advance of the Gauls. It was the beginning of a long and arduous struggle that would last almost an entire day. At the ideal moment, Julius ordered the hidden legions to attack the rear of the Gaulish army. The Gauls resisted for some time, but the discipline and determination of the Roman legions defeated the numerical advantage of their enemies. The Helvetians surrendered. Julius allowed many to be freed, provided they returned to their lands and agreed to work on the plantations to feed the legions. Others were not so lucky. They were sent as prisoners to Rome, where they would be sold as slaves. This heroic victory marked the beginning of several conquests in Gaul. Soon after, Caesar and his legions fought against the Germanic tribe of the Suevi and achieved another great victory. In the years that followed, Julius Caesar continued to advance into Gaul, establishing new alliances, subjugating tribes, or, when necessary, destroying cities and villages. Of course, the Gauls did not accept Roman occupation peacefully. Sometimes some tribes rebelled, which led to new battles. After quelling a rebellion by the Belgian tribe in 55 BC, Gaul was almost completely conquered by Julius Caesar. Caesar had accumulated enough wealth to pay off his debt to Cassius, and after that, he would have enough to live in peace. His term as consul was also coming to an end. After that, he would have to return to Rome. But that year, one of his legions in northern Gaul spotted a strange island on the horizon. That island was Britain. Caesar had already read about the existence of that island in ancient Greek manuscripts. Upon learning of its location, he once again felt the ambition and desire to go where no other Roman had been. To cross the sea and reach Britain, Julius Caesar needed two things: boats to transport his soldiers and time. Caesar ordered the construction of some boats, which would take many months to complete. Impatient with the slow progress in building the boats, Caesar decided to take a risk. Only part of his legions would cross the sea to build a fortified camp. But he did not foresee the disaster that eventually occurred, as that region is often affected by storms. During the crossing, a strong storm pushed the Roman ships against the rocks of the cliff. The few survivors who reached the beach were surprised by the British war chariots and retreated to their ships. This defeat did not affect Julius Caesar's determination, but it took him a long time to obtain the necessary votes. In 54 BC, Julius Caesar finally arrived in Britain, where he initially set up a fortified camp near the beach. The Britons did not accept Roman occupation peacefully. Caesar spent more than a year in Britain, waging war and subjugating the numerous tribes in that territory. This new conquest further enhanced Julius Caesar's reputation. The people of Rome praised his achievements, which further concerned some members of the Roman Senate. During Julius Caesar's time in Britain, new problems began to arise in Gaul. The tribal leaders asked their warriors to gather and drive the Romans out of Gaul. Caesar knew that this threat was serious. If Gaul united under a single banner, it would be virtually impossible to recover the conquered territories. One of these insurgent leaders was the famous Vercingetorix, prince of the Arvinus tribe. Vercingetorix managed to gather many tribal chiefs and warriors under his command to attack the Roman garrisons in Gaul. When Caesar returned to Gaul, the Vercingetorix forces were forced to retreat to avoid a direct confrontation with the Roman legions. In their flight through Gaulish territory, Vercingetorix's troops destroyed everything in their path. They burned villages and crops so as not to leave food for the Romans. The strategy was working. The situation for Caesar's legions was not positive. The soldiers began to succumb to hunger and exhaustion caused by the long march. Julius Caesar once again used his powers of persuasion and began to intimidate and bribe the tribal chiefs who were not yet allies of Vercingetorix. Caesar managed to confiscate precious supplies to feed his soldiers and continue the pursuit. Several battles were fought along the way, and Julius Caesar once again proved his worth by dismounting from his horse and joining his soldiers at the forefront of the most chaotic battles. The legionnaires felt enormous pride and admiration for their general. Many fought to the end to defend Caesar's life and dreams. Finally, the Vercingetorix were forced to retreat to the city of Alesia, built on top of a hill and a good place to defend against the Roman legions. The siege of Alesia was one of the most famous in history. Julius Caesar and the Vercingetorix needed to make the most of their skills as commanders. Caesar surrounded the city of Alesia. He knew that if he tried to force his way into the city, it would cost the lives of many of his legionaries. The other alternative was to starve those inside the city, cutting off food and water until they were forced to surrender. But Caesar did not have much time. He was aware of the approach of a Gallic army whose mission was to rescue the inhabitants of Alesia. If this Gallic army arrived in time, Julius Caesar and his legions would be surrounded by two enemy forces and would have no chance of victory. The solution was to build two wooden walls around the city. One would keep the inhabitants of the city trapped inside. The other would be able to contain the approaching army. The strategy was successful. When the Gallic army arrived, the Roman legions once again proved their worth, defeating a much larger number of enemies. After witnessing this great victory, Vercingetorix surrendered to Julius Caesar. Battle of Carrhae. Marcus Cassius was an excellent merchant and negotiator, but his skills as a military commander were not as sharp as those of Julius Caesar and Pompey. Cassius perished in that battle, and with him the alliance of the triumvirate was broken, allowing General Pompey to take political control of Rome. Julius Caesar's emerging fame and wealth deeply concerned General Pompey, who had felt great contempt for him from the beginning. Without the presence of Marcus Cassius to support Julius Caesar in the Roman Senate, Pompey saw no reason to tolerate Caesar's existence and began to make serious accusations against him. Pompey claimed that Julius Caesar had prolonged his campaign in Gaul, whose original term was only 5 years. Pompey knew this was not true. He had met secretly with Marcus Cassius and Julius Caesar to decide the city's policy. At this meeting, they agreed to give Caesar 5 more years to conquer Gaul. Another accusation was that Julius had used the strength of the legions for his own benefit and made a fortune in the Roman Senate. Pompey issued an order to Julius Caesar. He would have to disperse his legions and return to Rome, where he would face trial in the Senate. At that time, there were few in the Senate with enough courage to oppose Pompey's demands. Julius knew that if he complied with that order, his life would be over and all would be lost. He therefore decided to march on Rome with his legions and demand respect, even if it had to be done by force. And so, in 49 BC, Julius Caesar and his legions were declared enemies of Rome in an event that went down in history as the Second Civil War of the Roman Republic. Caesar was not concerned when the news reached him. He already knew of Pompey's aversion to him, and a direct confrontation between the two was inevitable. Julius Caesar faced the sad reality that, in order to return home, he would have to attack his own city. Pompey was an experienced general and knew that Rome would not be able to resist the veteran legions of Gaul for long. He needed to gather more soldiers to defend the city. To do so, he summoned the legions, serving in Greece and nearby territories, and so began a race against time. Pompey eagerly awaited the arrival of more soldiers, while Caesar marched as quickly as possible to reach Rome before Pompey's reinforcements. To make matters worse for Caesar, he crossed the Rubicon River. Roman generals were expressly forbidden from crossing the Rubicon with their legions on their way to Rome. Caesar knew that crossing the river meant there was no turning back. In this context, Julius Caesar uttered one of his most famous quotes, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. Crossing the river with his legions would take too long, and Caesar did not have that luxury. He decided to take a chance and advance with only one legion in a forced march. The other legions would follow immediately behind at a slower pace, preserving their strength for the approaching battle. Both captains experienced agonizing days, but Caesar's legions once again proved their worth and reached Italy with remarkable speed. Seeing no other alternative, Pompey gathered his personal guard and, together with some senators and allies, left the city of Rome shortly before Caesar's arrival. Pompey headed for the Roman city of Brunicio, from where he sailed to Greece with the plan to join forces with the local legions to launch a counterattack against Julius Caesar. When Julius Caesar finally entered the city gates, the streets were virtually deserted. The Roman citizens were unsure of Caesar's intentions. Perhaps he would return as a hero, or, alternatively, as an enemy seeking revenge for having been exiled from his city. But they had nothing to fear. Caesar did not allow his legionaries to attack the population or loot the city. When the mood in the city calmed down, Caesar gave a public speech reassuring the population. He appointed one of his most trusted men to take command of the city. The chosen one was Mark Antony, who had served with Julius in Gaul and proved to be an excellent military commander. Caesar still had to wait a few months to continue his pursuit of Pompey. New ships had to be built to transport the legions across the sea. While the ships were being built, Caesar restored order in the city of Rome by passing new laws, electing new senators, and taking care of the city's financial affairs. Still waiting for the ships to be completed, Caesar went to Spain. There he defeated Pompey's supporters, ensuring that Rome would not be attacked while he made his way to Greece. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar and Pompey finally clashed for the first time in the Battle of Dyrrachium, which took place in a region in northwestern Greece. Pompey Magnus. To Caesar's great surprise, Pompey assembled a remarkable army of about 36,000 infantry soldiers and 7,000 cavalrymen. Julius Caesar feared that new reinforcements would arrive for Pompey. He decided to act quickly, setting up a fortified camp. With only 22,000 men ready for battle, the outcome was disastrous for Caesar. Pompey attacked a weak spot in the wooden wall protecting Caesar's camp, and chaos quickly ensued. With fewer soldiers and his defenses compromised, Julius had no choice but to order a full retreat. This defeat reminded Julius Caesar why Pompey the Great was one of the greatest generals of his time. He could not be underestimated again. Caesar retreated to a new camp, but had little food and drinking water for his men. With his supplies running low, Julius Caesar needed to act quickly. On August 9, 48 BC, the Battle of Pharsalus was fought in the region of Thessaly, Greece. The fighting began slowly, with both generals carefully studying their opponent's movements. A fight between two Roman armies trained in the same formations and tactics could not have a simple conclusion. The battle was extremely aggressive. Both sides tried to flank their opponents. Pompey benefited from a larger cavalry, but Caesar's veterans had already faced all kinds of challenges and could not be easily overwhelmed. Even though they were greatly outnumbered, Caesar's legions managed to resist the enemy cavalry and flank the infantry, gaining total control of the battle. Pompey saw his army destroyed before his eyes. He understood that he was not facing an ordinary man. Pompey was defeated and had to retreat as quickly as possible. After this defeat, General Pompey found himself in a terrible situation. Most of the senators who had left with him for Greece were now fleeing to other Roman colonies. Some even went to meet Caesar, begging for forgiveness. Pompey fled to Egypt, which at the time was part of the territories ruled by Rome. He sought refuge among the Egyptian nobility, but did not expect a cruel twist of fate. Some members of the Egyptian elite feared that if they protected Pompey, they would be inviting the wrath of Caesar, who was already on his way to Egypt. Pompey was attacked and killed as soon as he set foot on Egyptian soil. A great Roman general met an inglorious end in foreign lands. When Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt, he was welcomed at the royal palace of Ptolemy XIII. As soon as he inquired about Pompey's whereabouts, only the remains of his former rival were handed over to him. Caesar was furious. He had planned to pardon Pompey and bring him back to Rome. He would even allow him to occupy a seat in the Senate. The disrespect was even greater when one considers that Pompey was a Roman consul and had been cowardly murdered by foreigners. But it was too late for Pompey. Julius Caesar, now in Egypt, became the target of conspiracy in the land of the pharaohs. The days were hot as ever in Egyptian lands. Even for a Roman accustomed to the demanding climate of the capital of the Roman Republic, the Egyptian heat caused great discomfort. In addition, the customs of that exotic people were nothing short of strange to Julius Caesar. After the long and exhausting pursuit of Pompey, Julius Caesar and his soldiers needed a well-deserved break. With this in mind, Caesar decided to spend a few days in Egypt, staying at the royal palace in Alexandria. In Rome, Caesar was elected to the position of dictator, the most powerful role in the Roman Republic. Caesar would remain in office for 1 year. Julius Caesar had finally reached the height of his political and military career, but peace never lasted long in his life. In 48 BC, Egypt was torn by civil war. Cleopatra sought the throne against her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. Caesar despised Ptolemy since he had been involved in Pompey's death. Cleopatra devised a plan to meet him. Hidden inside a bundle of cloth, she was smuggled into Caesar's chambers. Her bold entrance won his attention, and she explained the situation in Egypt. That very night, she gained his support. Caesar threw the weight of his legions behind her cause. The struggle that followed became known as the Siege of Alexandria. Battles raged through the city and across the Nile. During one clash, Caesar's own ship capsized, and he was forced to swim to shore to save his life. Ptolemy's ship also sank, but unlike Caesar, he drowned in the river. Cleopatra emerged victorious, securing her throne. From that point on, Cleopatra and Caesar became inseparable. Their relationship stirred scandal in Rome, but Caesar made no attempt to hide it. He even brought Cleopatra to the city, angering the nobility. Soon after, Caesar marched east and crushed the forces of King Pharsalus II with astonishing speed. His victory was so swift that he sent back to Rome a simple report. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Yet in Rome, suspicion grew. Some whispered that Cleopatra had borne Caesar a son, Ptolemy XV, known as Caesarion. Though Caesar never formally recognized him, many feared this meant he intended to found a dynasty binding Rome and Egypt together. In 44 BC, the Senate appointed him dictator for life. At 55 years old, Caesar remained as ambitious as ever, but his rise alarmed many senators, who believed he threatened the republic itself. A conspiracy formed, led by Gaius Cassius Longinus and joined by Marcus Brutus, a man Caesar trusted as his own son. On the Ides of March, the Senate met in the theater of Pompey. Warned of the danger, Caesar ignored the threat and entered the chamber. There, the conspirators surrounded him. One drew a dagger and slashed at his robe. Dozens followed, plunging their blades into him. Caesar was struck 23 times. Among the last was Brutus himself. Falling at the base of Pompey's statue, Caesar pulled his cloak over his face. The man who had survived countless wars and enemies was gone, murdered by his own peers. His death did not save the Republic. The conspirators expected to be hailed as heroes, but instead they faced a furious people. Rome wept for Caesar. At his funeral, crowds threw offerings onto his pyre until the flames consumed even the Senate building. Cassius and Brutus fled but were hunted down. Both took their own lives only 2 years later. In his will, Caesar named his grandnephew, Gaius Octavius, as heir. The young man took his name, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavian. In time, he would become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Julius Caesar's life had ended, but his name endured. For centuries, rulers across the world would call themselves Caesar, a title that became synonymous with power and greatness. Caesar would remain in office for 1 year. Julius Caesar had finally reached the pinnacle of his political and military career. However, peace never lasted long in Julius Caesar's life. In 48 BC, Egypt was undergoing a civil war. The renowned Cleopatra wanted to claim the royal throne for her younger brother, Ptolemy. Julius Caesar did not like Cleopatra's brother. After all, Ptolemy was one of those responsible for Pompey's death. Knowing this, Cleopatra began to devise a plan to meet Caesar. Using a creative plot, Cleopatra managed to enter Caesar's room. This unusual presence caught the Romans' attention, and Cleopatra explained the political situation in Egypt to him. People claim that Julius Caesar and Cleopatra became lovers that very night. Caesar supported Cleopatra's ascension to the throne, guaranteeing the military support of his legions and fighting against Ptolemy's troops. A series of battles ensued, which became known as the Siege of Alexandria. Finally, Ptolemy was defeated in the deadly Battle of the Nile in 47 BC. Battle of the Nile. The main conflict of this battle was fought on the waters of the Nile, where Julius Caesar's warships faced Ptolemy's ships. During the fight, Julius Caesar's ship capsized, forcing the great Roman general to swim to the riverbank to save his own life. Ptolemy's boat also sank during the fight, but he was not so lucky. He drowned in the Nile. After this battle, Cleopatra took command of Egypt, and her romance with Julius Caesar was already the subject of much gossip and unhappiness in Rome. Mark Antony, in command of the city of Rome, was struggling to maintain political order and cover up Caesar's delay in returning to his duties in the Senate. Even though he was the target of harsh criticism, Julius Caesar decided not to continue his romance in secret. He chose to bring Cleopatra to Rome, which was interpreted as a great insult by many Roman nobles. Julius Caesar also traveled to the Middle East, where he won a crushing victory against the army of King Pharsalus II. The victory against King Pharsalus II was so quick and easy that it inspired Caesar to utter one of his most famous quotes, Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Veni, Vidi, Vici. Time passed, and the romantic relationship between Caesar and Cleopatra caused great suspicion among Roman magistrates. Some rumors mention Cleopatra giving birth to a son by Julius Caesar. The couple's alleged son was named Ptolemy x 15 Caesarion. However, Julius Caesar never officially recognized the child, although Cleopatra claimed to be certain that Caesar was the father. Many senators began to fear that Julius Caesar was trying to become emperor, and by having a son with the powerful Queen of Egypt, he would be starting a line of heirs with rights to rule the Roman and Egyptian territories. In addition, some Roman senators and nobles disliked Julius Caesar and were always looking for reasons to criticize him. Some of these senators were former supporters of Pompey. Although they had chosen the enemy side, they were forgiven by Caesar. To make matters worse, during a festival known as Lupercalia, Mark Antony attempted to crown Caesar's head with a golden diadem, typical of Greek kings. The gesture was meant to be a joke, but it was interpreted as an insult by those present. Even though Caesar tried to quickly remove the item, Julius Caesar did not seem to care much about the opinion of his opponents and began to delegate political positions to friends and relatives. He also began to create laws that were passed without the consent of the Senate. Caesar continued to increase his power and sphere of influence in the city. Even with all his achievements, Caesar still wanted to launch a new military campaign against the powerful Parthian Empire, which remained strong against all Roman attacks. In 44 BC, the Roman Senate appointed Julius Caesar dictator for life, guaranteeing him the right to hold the office for the rest of his life. At 55, Julius Caesar remained as ambitious as ever. This increased the fears of his opponents in the Senate, who began to plot against the life of the great general. The main supporter of the conspiracy against Caesar was Senator Gaius Cassius Longinus, who spared no effort to convince other senators to join his cause. In March 154 BC, Julius Caesar went to the theater in Pompeii, where a session of the Roman Senate was to be held. That same day, Mark Antony learned of the plot against Caesar and rushed to warn him of the imminent danger. Upon entering the Senate, Caesar was warmly welcomed by the senators, among whom was his nephew Marcus Brutus, for whom Caesar had great esteem. In order not to arouse suspicion, one of the senators handed Caesar a scroll with a petition for him to evaluate. The other senators walked up to him, pretending to be interested in reading what was written. Then the closest senator drew a dagger hidden in his own cloak and grabbed Caesar's robe. Julius Caesar tried to dodge his attacker, but the senator began to shout for help, demanding that the other members of the conspiracy advance. Caesar was attacked by 60 senators and mortally wounded by about 23 stab wounds. One of the last to do so was his own nephew, Marcus Brutus, who delivered the fatal blow. In an ironic twist of fate, Caesar fell at the feet of the statue of Pompey. Looking up, he saw his nephew's face, and with his last ounce of strength, pulled down his cloak to cover his face, avoiding the shame of looking into the eyes of the traitor. Julius Caesar had survived countless battles and challenges in his life, but now he lay motionless on the cold floor of the Roman Senate. There are no accurate accounts of Julius Caesar's last words. Some believe he said to his nephew, "Et tu, Brutus, But this phrase was written by William Shakespeare and immortalized in the play in which he portrays Julius Caesar. But the writers Suetonius and Plutarch believe that Caesar did not say a single word at the moment of his death. After Caesar's assassination, most of the senators fled the Senate, fearing capture by the soldiers guarding the city. The conspirators believed that Caesar's death would bring the city's political power back into the hands of the Senate. However, they did not expect the emerging popular uprising. Caesar was seen as a hero by most of the population. When news of his death spread, the citizens of Rome began to gather to protest against it. Julius Caesar's body was taken to be cremated in a public place. According to the tradition of the time, a large number of people attended the ceremony and, as a farewell gesture, threw wood and personal items onto the funeral pyre, causing the fire to spread to such an extent that it damaged the Senate building. The crowd chased after the conspirators Cassius and Brutus, who managed to escape to Greece amid the confusion. Brutus, perhaps consumed by regret, ended up committing suicide in 42 BC. Queen Cleopatra and her son Cicero were in Rome at the time, but returned to Egypt a few days after Julius Caesar's death. In the public square, Mark Antony read Julius Caesar's will. He named his grandnephew Gaius Octavius as his successor and gave him the right to use the name Caesar. Gaius Octavius changed his name to Gaius Julius Caesar Octavius, and a few years after the death of his uncle, Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus was crowned as the first Roman emperor. Subsequent Roman emperors began to include the surname Caesar in their own names. The great story of Julius Caesar came to an end, but the name of this remarkable man became synonymous with greatness. Hallelujah! If you like this story and want to see more impossible confrontations like this one, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave us your opinion in the comments. And as always, may Mars guide you in battle.